So before we can start talking about the uses of the bandsaw, first we have to understand that not all cuts made on wood are the same. The first type of cut that can be made is a rip cut. A rip cut is made in the direction that the wood grain is flowing. You can see typically when you're looking at a board of wood, it is from left to right or right to left. A miter cut is made at an angle. Not always a 45, any sort of angle that's going at a slant is considered a miter cut. And finally, we have a cross cut. A cross cut cuts across the grain, going in the opposite direction the grain is moving. Now, not all machines can make all of these cuts. You need to understand that each machine and saw blade has a different purpose. The use of the bandsaw is to cut materials apart. Now, as mentioned before, there are different types of cuts. The great thing about our bandsaw is that it can make all three cuts: rip cuts, miter cuts, and cross cuts. Our bandsaw can also cut different materials other than wood. Now, the blade currently set on our bandsaw is set to cut wood only. If you were interested in cutting metal or plastics, you would have to change the blade out.
Okay, a general safety rule in here, in addition to the ones that were already mentioned, are about safety guards. Now, I'm going to use the bandsaw as an example for this because the bandsaw has quite a few safety guards. A safety guard is an object that is keeping you safe from something that's moving on the machine. So on the bandsaw, we have a few safety guards. This first safety guard I'm going to open is called the wheel guard. And inside the bandsaw, we have an upper wheel and a lower wheel on the bottom. And when the machine is on, the wheel spins, and that's what turns the blade. Now, we want to keep the guard in place because if that blade ever pops off, it's better that it would pop into the guard than into your face. So we want to keep the guard in place. The other guard you see here is a blade guard. And if that much of the blade was exposed, it would be very dangerous. You can see I can raise and lower the guard, but we really don't want the guard to be out and that much of the blade exposed while you're working. It's just not safe. Now, this is just for the bandsaw, but all machines have safety guards. So please remember, the guards are there to keep you safe. You always keep safety guards in place. Okay, so now we know what the bandsaw is used for. I want to just point out the main safety rules that I'm going to need you to be aware of while you're in here using this in class. First one, there's a certain location you don't want to stand, and that would be to the right. That is in this area. The reason why we don't want to stand to the right is because if for some reason the blade would ever snap or break, it could shoot out to the right and impale the person who's standing there. So again, avoid standing to the right of the machine while it is on. Okay, the next safety rule is that this blade, unfortunately, is a little too thick. So we cannot make curves or circle cuts or radius cuts on this machine without making relief cuts first. If you would try to make this cut and you'd be twisting the wood, you'd snap the blade. So again, no curves, tight curves, or circle cuts used on this machine. Another thing is, when you're cutting, let's say that you are pushing the piece of wood through and you realize, oops, I'm cutting crooked, and then you pull the wood back. That is called a back cut. And the reason why you don't want to make a back cut is because sometimes it will pinch on the back of the blade, and that can be what makes it pop off the wheel and then break and then possibly shoot out. So no back cuts using this machine. The final rule is keep your fingers on either side of the machine, never in front of the blade. This is called the cut line, the line that is directly in line with the blade. So we want your hands to be on either side while you're cutting, never in line or close to the blade.
So now let's talk about the drill press. The main use of the drill press is to drill holes in different types of material. Now we will be primarily drilling into wood. You are able to drill into metals or plastics by adjusting the speed. The speed is controlled by the knobs that are at the top of the drill press. In the picture, if you're looking closely, it's the two beige knobs at the top. If you're drilling into metal, you would need to increase the speed. If you're drilling into plastic, you would need to decrease the speed. Now, the other thing to keep note of is that with using the drill press, you can use different types of bits. We have hole saw bits, we have spiral bits, and then we have spade bits.
Okay, so here are the safety rules for the drill press. Again, these are just a few. There are many more than that, what I'm about to explain, but I do want you to follow the ones I'm about to show you. So first of all, let's say I'm going to drill a hole into this piece. I have marked where I want to drill the hole, but before you drill, whether you're drilling into plastic, wood, or metal, you need to center punch first. Now I'm just going to move my vise out of the way here. We center punch with a hammer and an actual center punch, and you line it up where that mark is going to be, and you just tap one time. What that does is it leaves a dent in the wood that allows the tip of the drill bit, or the spade bit like you see here, to go in straight. So again, the safety rule is always center punch first. The next safety rule is that we want to clamp or secure whatever we are drilling. So you can see here I have a small vise that can be used to help clamp it. I also have a quick grip clamp. If you're working by yourself, you can use a quick grip clamp to help secure your piece down to be drilled. Or you can use a partner. It doesn't matter which of the three you use, you just need to remember that whatever you're drilling, it must be secured or clamped. The final rule about this machine has to do with the area that's right here, which is holding our our bit in place. It is called the chuck. Now, I'm pretty sure most people would think, okay, a part is moving, I shouldn't touch it, but sometimes my students do things that don't make sense. So if you see this area right here, I'm going to quickly turn the machine on and I'm going to turn it off. Notice how it is still spinning. You never want to try to stop the chuck by hand to try to get it to slow down faster. So please remember, number 1, center punch. Number 2, clamp what you're drilling. And number 3, never try to stop the chuck by hand.
So the next machine we're going to discuss is the scroll saw. It's very similar to other saws we'll use in my class, except for it's a little bit smaller and the blade is more interchangeable. Now the blade can be changed based on the material you are cutting. The other thing about the scroll saw is that it can do curve cuts, radius cuts, and very tricky, tight, angled cuts that some of the other machines cannot do based on the small size of the blade.
Okay, this machine is the scroll saw. Several of you will probably remember you've using it in the grades levels past that you've had me in class. Now, the first safety rule to remember is that the blade currently on the scroll saw is meant to cut wood. If we were trying to cut into plastic or metal, we would have to change the blade so that it's suited to that material. So the first rule is make sure the blade matches the cut to the material you're using. And since we're all primarily cutting into wood, you're fine. They're all set to wood working cutting blades to start. The next safety rule is going to sound a little strange. The safety rule is check the blade before use. Now that does not mean that you're going to turn the machine on and put your finger into the blade. What you do is very carefully, the back side of the blade, just strum it like a guitar string one time. What this does, or you can press on it on the side if you don't want to strum it, that just checks to make sure the blade is not too loose and it's not falling out. You never want to turn the machine on with a loose blade. The blade can snap, rupture, and go flying, and that wouldn't be very good. The next safety rule that we want to remember has to do with this silver thing that kind of looks like a fork. It is called the hold down. And it's called the hold down because it's supposed to hold down the piece we are cutting. So if we're cutting through this piece of wood, it should be touching it. There should be no space in between. Now, if you're cutting a larger piece of wood, there's an orange knob on the side that you loosen, and then you raise the hold down up to make it higher for a thicker piece of wood, or you lower it for a smaller piece of wood.
Now let's talk about the use for the disc sander. The disc sander's primary use is to sand, form, smooth, or shape different types of material. In class, we'll be using it primarily for wood only. How the disc sander works is basically the disc in the back is a large piece of 80 grit sandpaper that when the disc is spinning, spins at a high rate and is able to sand material off very quickly. There are several safety rules that go with this machine that you'll need to pay very close attention to.
Okay, so this is the disc sander. As you can clearly see, one of the first safety rules has to do with what's on the table. We have a side that says stay off and a side that says yes, use this side. Now the reason why we want this side to stay off is when this disc is spinning, if you would put a piece of scrap wood on this side, it's going to want to take that piece of wood and make it fly. So you never want to put the wood on the side that says stay off. You also never want to put the wood just up top because it'll pull it down fast and hard against the table. So the safety rule is keep the wood on the table and only use the yes side. The next safety rule has to do with this area right here that says watch out for pinch point. When you're sanding, your fingers should always be extremely far away from the disc. If you get your hand too close to the disc, as it's spinning downward, it can grab your finger and pull it down in. That did happen to a student about 10 years ago. He got his finger stuck in this area and it sanded off the top of his pinky. We don't want that to happen again. So as a reminder, keep your fingers back, never close to the pinch point or anywhere along this side of the disc. The final safety rule for this machine is actually a little bit different. It's the only rule that applies for any of the machines in my class. Once you turn the machine off, the disc is still going to be spinning. It's not safe to leave the disc spinning. You don't just want to walk away. So the safety rule is to actually use a block of scrap wood to help stop and slow down the disc. That is after you turn it off. You never want to just push the wood into it too hard. That can actually damage or completely split the disc. So don't do that. You'll just lightly sand it to get it to stop once you've turned it off.
This is the power miter saw. Its main use is to cut wood apart. Now, in the video that you'll see when I refer to the safety rules, I mentioned the types of cuts that this machine can and cannot make. As a correction, in the video I never mention it making a miter cut, but this machine can make miter cuts. In looking at the picture, if you look at the bottom, the table at the bottom can actually be shifted to the left or right depending on the type of angle you want to make. That's how this machine gets its name, power miter saw, miter meaning angle. This machine can make cross cuts and miter cuts, but remember, it cannot make rip cuts.
Okay, so this is the power miter saw. As we talked about earlier, there's different types of cuts that all saws can make. Just as a reminder, this machine makes cross cuts only. So when you're looking at the piece of wood grain, remember you can only cut across the wood, never in line with the grain. Before you even plug the machine in or turn it on, you want to check the safety guards. Again, this is another machine that uses safety guards. The main safety guard on this machine is this piece right here. If for some reason it ever gets stuck up and the blade is widely exposed to you, that is not safe. So to check the safety guard, it's very simple. You don't turn any buttons on. All you do is grab the handle, pull it down, make sure the guard comes up. When you bring the machine back up, the guard goes down. The next safety rule is you can see there's an area that shows no hands. The no hand zone is the area that has the yellow and black tape. Your hands should never be inside this area. When we're cutting, if we're going to cut this piece of wood, the wood cannot just be loosely placed and then cut. It does need to be held or secured, and even more importantly, it needs to be up against the fence in the back. If you leave the wood out and you bring the blade down, the teeth of the blade will notch into the wood and the momentum of it will want to pull it back. Now, if it pulls it back straight, it's okay, but the problem is there could be some movement of your hand towards the blade, the wood could splinter, it could be picked up, and it could go flying. So remember, make sure your wood is secured when you go to cut, and it should always be up against the fence. The next safety rule is when the blade is done cutting, you never take the sides of the wood or a piece of scrap wood and push it up against the side of the blade. This can knock it off track. It can also burn the wood. So again, no scrap wood used to stop the blade from spinning. The final safety rule that's in regards to my classroom is that if a piece of project or clothing or body part would unfortunately get stuck in this machine, in the case of an emergency, we want to hit the big red button. It's located against the wall in the back. Remember, that's used in case of an emergency only. It basically will cut the power to all the machines and stop them immediately. Remember, it doesn't turn off the lights, call 911, or have a siren go off. All it does is cut the power to all the machines.
This is the power drill. Now, it has several uses, and it's probably one of the most common power tools you might be familiar with. Sometimes it's called a hand drill, sometimes it's called a hammer drill, sometimes a cordless drill. Now, we'll be using it in class to actually drill holes in materials. As you can see in the picture, there is a drill bit attached. But it can also be used for fastening materials. Typically, we use this to fasten screws into materials and keep them together.
Okay, so the next tool we're going to talk about is a power tool, and this is very common in a lot of homes. So some of you may actually have this tool at home. We call it the power drill or the power hand drill. Now this is a cordless drill. You can see it has a battery pack on the bottom. The first safety rule with this tool is never carry the drill by the battery, or if you have a cord, by the cord. If you do that, there's just little tiny plastic prongs that hold it in place. It could break, and then we'll never be able to use this again. So again, never carry it by the battery or the cord. Now, we will be using the power drill to actually drill holes using a drill bit. If for some reason you need to change the drill bit in and out, please make sure you disconnect the power first. And you do that by unplugging the battery, or there's these tiny buttons on either side. If you leave that button in the middle position, that's the safety, and then no power can be sent to the drill. The reason why we want to make sure that we have the power off or the safety on is so that when you're changing that bit, you don't accidentally turn on the drill while you're changing the bit and you get your skin pinched in this gap. So again, make sure you disconnect the power when you're changing the bits in and out. Okay, the next safety rule has to do with when you are drilling. You want to make sure you secure what you're drilling. If you have a partner, you can use a partner to help hold it down. Or if you don't have a partner, you can always use, again, a quick grip clamp located in the back of the classroom. That will help to hold the piece down while you're drilling. If you don't secure it down, it will just spin in circles, and that's not safe. The piece could go flying or hit you. The final safety rule is that when you go to drill, you always want to drill straight and apply pressure. The back of the power drill has these little nibs that help to give you a better grip on your palm. The reason it's there is for you to be able to apply pressure. If you just hold it straight, the drill will not go in. You have to apply pressure and drill straight when it's time to drill.